Good evening, section crew, and welcome back to the Second Section podcast. I'm your host, Andy Dorsch, and tonight we got a real awesome show lined up for you. We're going to do a broken rail show tonight on the topic of 3D printing. So joining me tonight is my co-host, Mike Ostertag. Mike, how you doing?
Great. It's hot.
It is hot. Yep. There it is. There's the weather talk that Bernard was talking about. But we got an all-star panel tonight to talk about the topic of 3D printing in model railroads. So without any further dilly-dally, let's get right into our guests here. So tonight we have Bernard, is it Hellen?
Yep.
Bernard Hellen from Miniprints. Hi, Bernard. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you. And yes, it is pretty toasty here in Toronto. So warm night.
It's a warm night all around. We have James Willmus. How's it going?
And then, pretty good.
Pretty good. And then we have, looks like Robert Frascella is joined us once again here on the second section. Welcome, Bob. How are you doing this evening?
We're doing great, and it's actually cool here in New England. So
at
wonderful. Least cooler than it is elsewhere.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And just to kick it off here, we got 29 people in the chat tonight already. Let me just go through the crew here. Dan's Model Railroading Journey, Camus Chris, Joe DeLusso, Dodo One Ops, and the Chicago Northwestern Mondovi line and HO scale. Then we got Thomas Imlay and Thomas Klomoski. Adam Cruz is here. Otter Creek and Rio Grande. Scott Thornton is out there. The Boomer Dioramas is in the room tonight. Eric from IMRRO.com. Tim D. Soko Olds 455, Randall Ellison, JT Medic, all in the house. And I just want to say thanks for joining us tonight. The rules for the folks in the chat are as follows. Let's keep the questions, comments, and subject matter around topics of model railroading, 3D printing. That way I don't have to boot you. Don't want to do that. But feel free to interact with our guests this evening, ask questions, and we'll pause the show at any time to get everything up and running. So to kick things off tonight, I want to just go into a little bit of a deep dive of our guests. We'll start with Bernard, and then we'll just kind of go around the screen here. And Bernard, why don't you go ahead, give yourself a little introduction, your model railroad interests, and then what is it that you do in the world of 3D printing?
Sure. I'm a recovering graphic designer, so I ran my own.
Hi, Bernard.
Yeah, not recovering too much, but yeah. Cheers. I ran my own graphic design and marketing agency for 30 years, and the model railroad aspect of my life started only about 7-8 years ago. As really a creative outlet. So I come into the model railroading hobby basically from the love of scenery, and didn't really know that much about railroading. And over the last 8 years have come to really appreciate, everything associated with it. And I've, really developed a love and an interest in operations.
Oh, fantastic.
So I went from a design approach to really sort of wanting to know more. 2 years ago, I've been running Miniprints for the last just over 2 years.
Okay.
It was 2 years in April. And 2 years ago, like a lot of people, my design business went to zero as a result of COVID, and everything was locked down. And my customers just were not in business anymore.
Sure.
So I had to do what a lot of people did, was pivot. And coincidentally, just as my design business was kind of winding down, I discovered the whole 3D printing thing.
Okay.
And my journey to sort of an accidental model railroad manufacturer really began because I needed an HO scale beaver for my own layout. So I model the Quebec Gatineau, which is a Genesee and Wyoming short line. And I've got a basement layout that's the biggest part of it is a room that's 30 feet by 10 feet. And I model the Genesee and Wyoming short line from Quebec City to Montreal with a focus on the Port of Trois-Rivières. And I needed an HO scale beaver, as I'm sure a lot of people have heard the origin story, but I needed one. So I thought, I'd make one. I showed a friend, sent a few out to friends, put it on Facebook. That's the origin right there. That's the guy. And that's really what started this insanity is the desire for that for my layout. And oops, here I am now, and it's been a bit of a crazy journey.
That's fantastic. So Miniprints, you guys certainly, you've been out there for a little bit now. Why don't you just quick tell us about the shop itself, all the things that you dive into, and what it's all about?
Sure. Well, Miniprints started with that beaver and led to a couple of other critters like a moose. And, then I started to work my way through pretty much every animal there is. And got, everything on here is either something that I wanted for my layout or a request that somebody had.
Yeah.
And then after sort of exhausting the world of flora and fauna, I started to play around with figures. And I really have been having a lot of fun with sort of, my model railroaders, because I model modern day freight operations.
Yep.
There just weren't a lot of figures out there. I mean, the things that I could get from Prizer or Woodland Scenics or any of the typical manufacturers, they're all great, but they're all sort of stuck in 1954 with a red kerchief and a blue hat.
Yeah.
So I wanted something a little bit more, modern.
Right.
And that led to this sort of the custom cruise line that you're on.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. And, and that one, the one you're on right there, number 3, is a great example because somebody said, can you make a guy with a remote control belt pack? So, it's all sort of grown organically by requests. Someone will have a good idea and say, what about this? And I can't make everything, but a lot does end up getting made.
Yeah, right.
And then, one thing just leads to another. And then, figures led to, I started to do objects, and
these TVs
the collection's
are awesome.
grown. It's grown over the last 2 years. The things that I really enjoy are the things that are fun, odd, weird, different, silly. I like the things that, everything's based on stuff you see in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another request. Someone asked me, actually, it's kind of funny because I had a bathtub and they said, well, what about a bathtub Madonna? I said, I have no idea what that is.
Oh yeah. My grandma and grandpa had one in their front yard.
Oh, there's people that just on the road that have one in their front yard.
Well, actually scroll down on that page, because the other thing I like to do, model railroaders are really interesting, curious people. So for a fascinating history of the bathtub Madonna, you can click on that link right there.
Our Lady of the Clawfoot.
I know there really is a prototype for everything, right?
Yeah.
So I'm anal enough, I guess OCD enough that I like to go down the rabbit hole. So if I'm, someone asked me, I had a bathtub, someone asked me for a bathtub. It's not that hard to go out and scan or find a Madonna. And it's not that hard to sort of mash the two together. And there is a perfect example of Miniprints because it's odd, it's different. It's something that I've never seen anyone else produce, which is important to me because I don't, some things you have to just, everybody has, their pylons, but I like to do things that aren't on the market, that are a little bit different. And I like to do things that are a little bit cheeky and fun.
Yeah. I mean, and It's really filling a niche within the market, that's for sure. I mean, I like some of the modern the modern crew and just the fun details. I spent myself or I caught myself spending about an hour and a half just going through each one of the characters that you have on screen here and just looking for that 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 story behind it. I think that's fantastic.
It's really become a passion project, and it's become a lot of fun. And I mean, we'll talk about this, I'm sure James and Bob have, theories on this too, but it's really interesting when your hobby becomes your job.
Yeah.
And, that is, oh, thanks, DJ. That's really nice. Appreciate that comment. DJ came up and visited last Sunday, last Sunday, which was great to meet him. I've been a big fan of his videos for years.
Same here.
And learned a lot, an awful lot. And it goes back to my comment about, not really knowing anything about railroading, but, really appreciating, what goes into, moving, transporting goods from A to B.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic intro, Bernard. And just to note for you, I did put your link to your website in the show notes here on the YouTube, and it will be in the audio as well. So
awesome, thank you.
And again, I have to say it, hashtag not sponsored. So, this we're just asking them to be here out of the goodness of their hearts. So, hashtag not sponsored. Go check out Miniprints. They got a lot of fun stuff out there, and really excited to dive into 3D printing with you tonight. So, James Willmus joins us. So you're a fan of the show, and you also have an interest in model railroading and 3D printing. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, and I will preface this just so the audience knows. I got a poor internet connection because I'm way out in the sticks in the western South Dakota. I do have a plan B, so if I do cut out, I might be coming back in. It just takes me a little bit to reset up something further in town. I'm only a few minutes out of town, but for some reason I got terrible signal. Anyways, hopefully I'll get through this. So, my model railroading journey, it started pretty much at birth. I grew up in Glenwood, Minnesota.
Okay.
For anybody who might know where that is. Big junction there for the Sioux Line and then the CP rail there, western Minnesota.
Okay.
We were just had our house about a third of the mile off the tracks there. Our driveway crossed it. And I've just been seeing trains my whole life. So that's pretty much how it started for me. And then when I was 15, I moved out here to Rapid City, South Dakota. And that's when the model railroading thing really kicked into gear. So there's a museum up in Hill City, South Dakota, as well as the 1880 train, which is a heritage railroad. I started volunteering there at that museum, and it was new at the time. Now it's about 10, 11 years old. So that's where my hobby really started coming into fruition. After that, I went off to college in Montana, and that's when I found out about this cool thing called 3D printing.
Nice.
I took a few classes on CAD design, but the 3D printing aspect is still brand new to me. So I'm only a few months maybe into my journey there for 3D printing.
Okay. So you're just starting out then.
Yeah, pretty much. And I got designs going, but it's, always a work in progress with this sort of thing.
Sure. So what type of modeling interests do you have then? So I'm going to guess, like Bernard, you're in this to make things for yourself first and foremost, right? What is your specific interest? You talked about the 1880 train. Is that your genre, or is it something else?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to explain to people that haven't been to the Black Hills, but the Black Hills of South Dakota have a very peculiar railroad history.
Okay.
And some of it, like Otto Perry, documented some of the lines that were out here back in the day. So we got black and white historical photos. We have the Homestake Mining Company. That's one of the largest, if not the largest, gold mining operation at one point in the world.
Wow!
And the first locomotive in the Black Hills is 1878. That was before there were even any mainline railroads coming out to the area. There's all sorts of narrow gauge, that sort of thing. So as far as my interests go, a lot of it is I want to use 3D printing as well as other tools to replicate a lot of the historical stuff that was in the Black Hills at the time. So we're talking about everything from little compressed air locomotives all the way up to these big, it's called a Class T2 Mallet. These are 2662 engines.
Yeah,
There's about half a dozen of them, I think. Yeah, half a dozen. They ran up in the Black Hills. So that's sort of my goals and my interests.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. And then do you have a 3D printer right now?
Actually, I have two. One is a filament and the other is resin. They're right behind me here.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Wonderful. So so it sounds like just getting back from college or just getting out of college, it's time to get back into the hobbies, right?
Yeah, it's not about 60 hours a week that I don't have anything else to do. So
there you go. Well, that's a good intro there, James. Welcome to the show. It sounds like a lot of people in the chat are familiar with your neck of the woods, so to speak. So feel free to interact with the folks there as we bring them up on screen. And then veteran of the show, Robert Frascella, how are you doing?
Just call me Bob.
Just call you Bob.
All
right. Just call you Bob. Very good. Welcome back to the second section. For those who haven't been introduced to you, would you do us the honor and give us a little bit of an introduction?
Okay, thanks, Andy, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm a retired civil engineer, so I have plenty of time on my hands. But I've always been in S scale. I have never modeled in any other scale for more than 50 years now. I've had this passion for modeling in S, the true craftsman scale, and I've always. Maybe I need one of those adult beverages too.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, over the years, I've always considered myself rather passionate about scratch building things. If it's not available in S, you have to build it.
Yep.
And I became very proficient in trying to build models using, back in the day, it would be basswood and cardboard. And then progressing to styrene, and you can build some unbelievable things in styrene. But then about 10 years ago, I switched my modeling era from the transition era to modeling the Delaware and Hudson in 1977. And that's where it became a challenge in S, because I think you can model the transition era and the steam era fairly well in S scale because there's plenty of commercial models available.
Yep.
But the challenge is trying to find second generation diesel locomotives. They're just not there.
No. So
I thought to myself, well, why not build them? And in 1977, the D&H inherited a bunch of locomotives from Conrail's predecessor railroads, like the Lehigh Valley and the Reading, C420s, GP38s, GP39-2s. None are available in S scale, not even close. About the closest thing to a GP38-2 is a GP35, which is 3 feet shorter and looks completely different.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe I can scratch build one out of styrene. And I started with some really good plans of the C420, which I've always loved the Century series of Alco locomotives. I thought they had that look of power and were able to pull as good as they look. So I wanted to have some late model Alcos on my layout. So I get out the styrene and start scratch building it and did the frame and the pilots, and it all looked great. And then I got to the hoods. Well, they curve in two different directions. The roofs are parabolic curves and the ends curve the other way. And try doing that in styrene.
Shapes.
Yeah.
Basic shapes.
That's a tough basic shape.
Right. There was an old joke once in Model Railroader, and it was about a basic car kit, and inside the kit was a block of wood, and the instructions says, "Carve it to look like a boxcar." So,
yeah,
basic shape.
all right.
But anyway, so about the same time, I read an article in Model Railroad Hobbyist magazine by I think it was Jack Burgess, on the basics of how to do 3D design and creating parts or having parts printed on shapeways. And this was about 2015, I believe.
Yeah.
I studied the article, learned how to do the 3D design, and started coming up with parts I couldn't scratch build or were impossible to find in S scale. And so from that I was able to create the short hood cab and long hood for the C420, which enabled me to finish that locomotive. And then I thought, well, that was easy. I think, well, for my next attempt, we'll do the GP38-2. So
yeah,
I was online at one time and indicating in a chat room that, you know, I'm trying to build this, only I can't get good plans or dimensions. And Mike chimes in. Mike Ostertag chimes in and says, well, I have a GP38-2 sitting in the yard here. What dimensions do you need?
Yeah.
So
Little did I know what I was getting
comes the tape
into.
measure.
Yeah, right.
Oh, good Lord.
So
Has it been a blast, though?
Mike was crawling all over that GP38-2, measuring things that aren't readily apparent on commercial plans that you know, can be found in Model Railroad or RMC. You know, like,
right.
You know, how do you get the curvature right on the fuel tank, or you know, what are the dimensions of the handbrake?
Right.
I got some really weird looks at work when I was crawling around by the fuel tank. What are you doing?
There?
What are you? I'm like, never mind. Never mind. It doesn't concern you.
It doesn't.
So Mike would measure this stuff up, do a little sketch right there in the cab, probably.
I have some of the sketches right here. Here's a sketch of one of the I think this is the light, like the under cab lights.
Yeah.
So I would send this. I'd take a picture of this with my phone and send it to Bob and say, "Here, can you work with this?" And like 2 hours later, "Hey, how's this look?" And there's the part.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And the one thing is, too, Bob, if you remember the very first conversation we had about this was you said, "Hey, how does this look?" And my first comment is, "You're missing the door on the top of the walkway." Here, hold on a minute. I'm going to go measure it. I went out and measured it, sent him the thing. And oh, by the way, here's the file for the knuckle busters for the door, for the latches, and stuff. And that's from there. I have crawled all over one of those engines.
So I gotta bust in with a question from Split Rock here, and he says, "So am I the only guy to work on models in the cab of a locomotive?" I mean, that's a valid question for the railroaders in the group. So,
well, seeing as how you're, yes, Tom, yes, you are, yeah, because some of us actually work at our job.
oh, sure. So, Bob, so then you started interacting with Mr. Ostertag here, and that sets you on sail on your 3D journey,
Right.
3D printing journey. So, I guess that's good and bad, right? You got the dimensions and the designs you need, but you also have a shop out on Shapeways too, right?
Yeah, I do. And a lot of the parts, a lot of the designs that I created are useful parts for other S scale modelers, whether they're wanting just to model the draft gearbox on the front of a locomotive, or use the handbrake parts that are usable on a multitude of locomotives.
Sure.
You know, they're all on my Shapeways shop. I
Sure.
don't do my own 3D printing. Maybe that's next step for me. But for me, this was something that came out of necessity. I needed to be able to create these designs and the subsequent parts in order to produce the locomotives and rolling stock that I needed for my layout.
Yeah. So
if it benefits other modelers, that's good too. On my Shapeways shop, I do not mark up the items, maybe a few pennies per dollar, but basically I want to make these parts available to other S-scalers. And what's interesting is that a lot of times I'll get requests from other scales to upscale or downsize parts because they're not available in their scales. It was interesting. A guy in Germany sent me a request to do my EMD turbo stack in 1:29 scale.
Is that F scale?
Yeah. Well, G scale or whatever 1:29 is, but it's basically the USA Trains GP38, and I gathered he was probably trying to build a GP39-2 turbocharged version. So, I've had requests for upscaling or downsizing parts quite frequently.
So let's just keep this in the back of our heads here. So we have 3 guests on here, and including one host, Mike, that started their 3D printing journey out of modeling necessity. So let's just hold that in the back of our heads as the discussion opens up. But I do want to point out that theme.
Are we going to circle back to that or something?
We're probably that's a little bit of foreshadowing here. But
all right,
Bernard had a question that he wanted to go ahead and before we kicked off the discussion this evening, and I wanted to kick it over to him right away. Bob, thank you for the introduction there. Bernard, you wanted to ask the section crew in the chat a question about 3D printing before we started our discussion, just to kind of poll the audience, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just curious to sort of help form the answers of the people in the chat. How many people had 3D printers? How many people were thinking of getting 3D printers? Just curious, where the audience is on their 3D journey. Are they predominantly users, tire kickers, something they're going to get in the next day, week, month, year?
Yeah. So as the folks respond to that in the chat, I'll just come out and confess, I'm very interested in 3D printing, but I myself right now, I don't think I'm gonna start dabbling into it. So for me, I'm a consumer on this level. So I'm very happy that folks like Bob and James and yourself are here to serve my needs. So that I'm very excited for. So
I've seen a lot of people comment on not necessarily tonight, but in the past, I've seen, I've got one. It's still in the box.
Yep.
I've got one. It's still in the box.
Yeah.
I've had one for a year. It's still in the box. I'm like, well, that's not doing you any good, get it, but the nice thing is like, I don't know if you can see it. It's maybe not, or maybe over here by my cut off arm. I have a Anycubic Photon right now. It is my 3D printer, and they're relatively inexpensive. They've come down in price a lot, So, I think people are going to start buying them more and more, but there's a huge learning curve to it. That's what I've learned.
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking from the comments that I'm bringing up here, it looks like there are several people that do have 3D printers, either the FDM or the resin printers. So it's I think there are quite a few print people here tonight on the show, but then there's also folks like myself and Joe DeLusso, but yeah, if certain products become harder to come by, I might have to go down that path myself. But I have friends, right? I'm surrounded by friends here that can certainly help me out in a pinch. So Yeah, it looks like we got a nice cross section. More majority of the chat seems to have 3D printers as opposed to not. Just from what I'm seeing come up tonight. So that's a good question, Bernard. Thanks for kind of kicking that off for us tonight. So I'm going to throw, I guess after the intros here, Bob. I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off too early here. Is there anything else on the introduction that we wanted to cover with you before I tossed in the softball question to get things rolling here?
I wanted to point out that 3 of my 3D printed locomotives are on the layout behind me. The C420, the 38-2, and the 39-2. And
yes,
and the white one over here is another C420 that's in production. So,
yeah, bring that one close up here. Let me get this comment out of the way so you guys can see that. So this is an S scale, folks, right? And I'll just do a little, or Bob, if you wanted to do a little narration of the model itself for the people catching this on the audio.
So to keep, I have a love-hate relationship with Shapeways. Number one, their prices are outrageous. So you try to only print the parts that you can't scratch build. So in this particular locomotive, the cab and short hood are 3D printed, as is the long hood.
Sure.
But the frame itself is made out of styrene because it's basically flat shapes that can be formed.
Yep.
3D printed pilot. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
This is very well. All that is 3D printed along with the ladder steps and the buffer plate and the pilot. And these tower supports that are used to support commercially available S-scale trucks.
Yep.
So that way you can use 3D printing to create almost any locomotive that you want, if you have the time to do the design. The interesting thing about a lot of locomotive designs, prototypically, is there's a family resemblance to most locomotives. For example, the C420, you could take your 3D design of your cab and short hood, shorten the hood, and it becomes a C424 hood, or cab and short hood. So
sure.
So those designs are in production now. The same thing with the GP 38 and 39. Everything basically except the long hood is the same on those locomotives. And I also, I haven't built one, but I do have a design available for the GP 40 as well. So I mean, here's one locomotive series, all of the from the GP 38 through the GP 40-2 that spans about 20 years, that accounts for 5,000 locomotives that EMD produced, that virtually every railroad operating from the 70s through the 90s had one of, so completely not available commercially in S-scale. So
yeah, right, exactly. So
that created my necessity to come up with these.
Was that so what type of 3D printer did Shapeways use there? And this is kind of going to maybe get us into some topical questions about the 3D printing itself. So what did they use there? Was that a resin printer, or was that like one of those filament ones?
No, it's a resin printer.
It is.
Shapeways has a variety of materials they use. Most of it is proprietary processes, so you really don't know how it's done.
Yep.
But basically, they will give you the limitations of the print bed, and you need to create your design to fit within that box. So,
okay. So then what? So I know that there's and I'm going to ask a bunch of like bumbling idiot questions to go along with my greasy meat hands. So So what are the types of 3D printers that are available? So and anyone can field this question on the panel. I know there's the resin ones, which are kind of in vogue now, but there are a couple, or there's other kinds, right?
Yeah, if you want, I can give you a general answer of it. I don't.
Sure.
There's a lot of them that are all abbreviated. So there's about 6 or 7 different abbreviations for the style of printing.
Okay.
But the two big ones that consumers have is a filament printer, where you have a roll of plastic that just gets deposited on a build plate in layers. So it's kind of like a hot glue gun in a way. Yep. And then you have the resin printers, which generally there's a couple different types, but basically you cure resin by some light source that flashes the different layers. And the resin printers tend to be really fine grained, while the filament printers aren't quite as detailed. However, the filament printers tend to be a little bit more, how would you call it? You can modify it, you can add things to it, you can do you can basically manipulate it and make it more how you want it to be. Okay. Another one that I know of is metal printing, and that is with sintering. And I'm not quite sure what the process is, but you basically have a metal powder that somehow the metal gets made into a solid object. That one's really cool, but that one's more of a commercial thing.
Sure. So, okay. Bernard, Bob, any comment there on the other types? This metal one, this one kind of took me by surprise. I didn't know that existed. I didn't know do you guys have any other comments or thoughts?
I can speak to DJ's question.
Okay, let's bring that up then. Yeah.
I see that on the screen.
Yep.
I bought my first 3D printer, call it 2.5 years ago. And since then, there's probably been at least 4 different generations of machine released. And I would say the machines that I'm using now, the differences between them and the ones that I had 2.5 years ago are really twofold. Well, 3 things have changed. One, they print substantially faster. Okay. So the printer that I have today probably prints 2 to 3 times faster than the one I started with. And I still have the machines all up and running. So there's nothing wrong with the ones from 2 years ago.
Sure.
But if I put the same thing on 2 different machines, one might take half an hour to print, the other might take 45 minutes, 2 hours to print, depending on, it's more like 2 hours versus half an hour. I mean, there's no significant time difference. So difference one is the evolution has been in speed.
Okay.
The second evolution has been build size. So my first printer had a plate, maybe this big. Yep. Now, there are printers that have plates, 4 times the size. I've gone from, I'm all Elegoo, so I've gone from an Elegoo, so there you go.
There you go.
There's the plate. So I've gone from an Elegoo Mars first generation to Elegoo Saturns, and those, you're looking at easily 3, if not 4 times the build volume as they continue to get bigger. So speed, build volume, and then fine detail. Although I will say that I'm hard pressed as the detail gets finer. I'm hard pressed with the naked eye to really see a difference. And I've run things on, the 2-year-old printer and the printer of today. And the printer of today is better for sure. But I mean, unless you're going down with a magnifying glass, if you're doing sort of Dungeons and Dragons, miniatures, maybe.
Yeah.
But the quality, I think the increase in quality is better, but it's less impressive than the increase for me in speed and plate size. Because plate size, you can just physically print bigger things. I couldn't print Bob's locomotive shell 2 years ago. It just wouldn't fit on a consumer resin printer. That would be commercial. Now, depending on how big that body shell was, with the right orientation, you probably could print it. It would take quite a while, but you could do it.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm finding
that's something I think you need to be cognizant of as a designer, is knowing how big your build plate is. And when I first started doing these designs, I created them into smaller pieces. Like, for example, this long hood is actually 2 pieces.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
that's going to fit on a smaller build plate. Break it at the radiator section and the, prime mover section, and then just design it so it's almost tongue and groove, and they just pop right together to form the long hood. And I don't do my own printing, so you still have to be cognizant of making them adaptable to multiple printers when you do your design.
Well, and one comment along those lines is that a lot of the stuff that we have in the real world is not one solid piece either. You look at railroad equipment, it is made in pieces. Now that
assemblies.
you don't necessarily have to follow the same seam, but you can follow a similar process where if you look at the object there, you break it down into its basic shapes and you go from there.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, you with your printer, what was build when you bought your printer, was build plate design a requirement or a consideration that you made?
No, actually, I bought mine. This is going to be pretty bad.
Oh, God.
I bought mine
I didn't
because
mean to dime you out. I'm sorry.
I bought mine because I actually wanted to be the first kid on the block to actually say I had one.
There you go.
And then I thought, well, now I bought this damn thing. What am I going to do with it? So I kind of, and that was right about the time Bob and I started getting really heavy into doing this. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me to learn how to do this using our own designs. And time is my mortal enemy. I should know better because it's kind of plug and play, right? So I can plug my design in there and just walk away from it and hope that what I put in there is going to work. And I have failed many times.
Here, let's just bring that up on screen there.
Yeah, this is a covered hopper. These are covered hopper bays. That's what this is supposed to be.
Oh, that looks good.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, this is for a Pullman standard covered hopper. There's nothing wrong with the design. It's the fact that I tried doing it when it was 58 degrees in my basement is what I believe is part of the problem, that the build plate can never get warm enough and started separating. So I waited a few weeks when it got warmer, and I still have another failure, but it looks a little closer to what it's supposed to be.
There you go.
And the thing is, the one thing as an amateur 3D printer, because I think it is fair that we start segmenting ourselves into professional and amateur statuses, because I by far am still learning all of the necessities behind it and all the stuff, and I don't totally understand all of it as much as I probably should, but it's like almost anything else. When you fail at something, you have to learn why it failed. And once you learn what that don't get discouraged. That's I guess my big message for tonight is, if you try it and you fail, it's a good thing that you fail, because you're going to learn by asking questions. There's so many forums out there, and so many people out there willing to help that know that have been right where you are. That, I mean, I'm sure Bernard and James, your first prints weren't exactly perfect, right? I mean, I mean, you probably had a failure rate of probably 60% or more at when you first started till you higher. Yeah. Well, see, and that's the thing is now once you get everything, tuned in, now it's just bing, bang, boom, right? But even then, there's still things.
I wish.
The one thing that I've learned the most is that 3D printing is very temperature sensitive. And I do mine in a basement, and during the winter time, I have my basement is down to about 20 to 25% humidity, but I'm down in the low 60s to high 50s for temperature. The resin doesn't like that. You know, it doesn't seem to like those temperatures. Now that we're in the summertime, I'm looking right now, I've got a temperature of 66 degrees with a humidity of 67. I'm willing to try this same print again to see what the difference in the temperature is. And it might be a thing where, hey, I just can't print during the wintertime unless I heat my room up to 70 degrees.
Sure.
You know, so that's kind of why I bought it, because I wanted to, like I said, be the first kid on the block, but I also wanted to learn.
Sure.
So, you know, that's all I got on that.
Well, and I'd love to jump in on that, because I think that's really interesting, because I see a lot of people seeing the pictures, you know, like we all have on Facebook or on the blogs of all the amazing things you can print. And there are a lot of there are a lot of machines that are just still in their boxes. And I've also seen a lot of, you know, people, you know, try it, fail, and say, okay, forget it. And I think there's a very specific type of person that should get a 3D printer, and a very specific type of person that shouldn't get a 3D printer. And what I've come to discover is 3D printing almost becomes a hobby within the hobby. Yep. So it almost becomes a subset of the model railroading. Now, the good news is model railroaders typically like to do things like Mike, experiment, tinker, try, investigate. You know, we're curious people that like to get our hands dirty, which is why I think a lot of us really take to it. But every minute, and I'm very aware of this, because sort of, you know, we haven't sort of talked about the dark side of 3D printing yet, but the dark side is, in the last 2 years that I've been running Miniprints, I've gone downstairs and turned on my basement model railroad twice. Ooh. Now, part of it is because, you know, and I think I see James nodding his head. Part of it is, well, you know, I've sort of turned a hobby into a business, and there are benefits and also not benefits associated with that. But it does take time away from the hobby. Now, I happen to enjoy it, and a lot of the benefit and satisfaction I was getting from making a model railroad, I get that same feeling from making something in 3D. You know, It's still crafting and making, and, you know, you're still, you know, using some of the same skills. But if you like to get your hands dirty, if you like to experiment, if you are prepared to spend the time, it's incredibly fulfilling. But it's not, by any means, it's not sort of download, hit print, walk away, save yourself $5, you know, and you didn't have to buy it. It's, you know, it can take weeks of experimentation, you know, to get that one thing.
And a lot of wasted resin.
Yeah, but you feel great. You know, it's fun. Like when you get it, it feels amazing, and you know, you stick it on the fridge and you say, "I made this." You know, like, beside your 5-year-old drawing, you know, it's like, "I made this, Daddy." Well, I made this, son. You know,
I made a hot mess, and right, Mike. I think we should. I think this is going to be a new segment of 3D print fails on the show instead of what's on your workbench. Let's do 3D print fails. And I mean, you know, what is it? The Pinterest fails that you see out there. Yeah. I think this is the thing.
Yeah. Hashtag failure.
Hashtag failure. So this is a new thing. So there's a couple questions, and we're kind of getting into that mechanical piece, or what, you know, talking about the details of 3D printing, and so what are the skills, you know, that a person would want to develop? You know, we talked about the type of person. So what skills do they need? They obviously need some software. So Split Rock brings up a question and says, what are suggestions for starter design software? So he just downloaded Fusion 360, the free version. He's going to try and learn that from YouTube. But I mean, can you use something like, was it Tinkercad or
SketchUp?
Yeah, Bob and I use SketchUp.
Sure.
Well, and what I use is same as what Split Rock's trying to use, is Fusion 360. Unlike a lot of people, though, I took college elective classes to actually learn the software. So
That's
I might
cheating.
not be the best person. It's very much cheating.
That's cheating.
That took a lot of cheating, yes, but that's how I found myself into Fusion 360, because it was intuitive for me. And I think that's what people really need to understand, is they have to go out and experiment with these different CAD softwares and find what works best for them.
There you go.
Because there's a plethora of them, and everybody's brains works a little bit differently. For me, I'm able to mentally break down a 3D model into its two-dimensional sketches. And if you're that kind of a person, Fusion 360 works pretty well, because you start with a sketch, and then you extrude the sketch to make it three-dimensional, and then you just play with it a little bit. But there's others like Blender, which is used often for animation, where you start with a ball of clay and you manipulate it, and that I can't really comprehend, but I'm sure somebody out there is able to use it.
And that's where that's what I was going to say. The program you use really depends on what you're designing. So it's also, I use Blender because I'm sort of more into the organic stuff, the organic shapes. So, I played around with, Fusion 360, but I'm not doing radiator hoods, and I'm not doing, locomotive parts. I'm doing more like, I'm mushing a beaver out of, logs. So, it really depends, there are hundreds of programs, but it feels like there are hundreds of programs, and not every program is going to be great for everything. It depends who you are, like James said, what your learning style is, what you feel comfortable, what your budget, because some are free, some cost money, and most importantly, in my mind, what you're trying to create.
Hey, Andy, can I share something that goes along with what James is just talking about?
You can't. That's not. Yes, of course you can.
Okay,
of course.
All right,
it's a sharing moment here.
All right, I'm gonna try to do this. Hold on a minute. You know how this always works.
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna go here and there.
Hashtag not prepared.
I'm prepared. I just okay.
Okay, we'll add that to the stream.
So,
oh my gosh,
this. I was at a train show down in Appleton, Wisconsin one time, and a kid, believe it or not, that I know, bought a class light, a second generation class light that somebody was selling. It was all $35-$50, whatever you bought it for.
Wow.
And I said, "Hey, can I borrow that?" And he goes, "For what?" I said, "I want to measure it." So this is my sketch that I made of measuring an actual second generation individual class light. It wasn't inside the locomotive. It was the whole part.
Yeah.
So this was the class sketch that I made. Well, using SketchUp, this is actually what my design ended up looking like.
Holy cow. Now
that
is this
now
the
this
free
is drawn
version?
1-to-1. Yeah, this is drawn 1-to-1. So I can scale this to whatever scale I need to.
Wow. So that is magnificent. And this is a free software that's available out there at SketchUp.
Yep.
And
It's got a pretty steep learning curve, but not so bad. Wouldn't you say, Bob? I mean, if you just sat down and played with it and made some basic square shapes, like I think there's a tutorial on here that shows you how to make a house.
Yeah.
And once you learn those basic commands, you can kind of almost make anything, really. I still have a little bit of work to do. The one thing I want to do with this is I designed this to actually use an MV product lens at one point. And now I'm kind of thinking about maybe trying my hand at printing a clear lens myself, maybe.
Oh.
But I actually put a dimple here in the center, which is easy enough, as a centering point for a drill bit. So you can drill this out and either light it or not light it and drill it straight through. So yeah, that and all that came from this drawing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but that's what James is talking about, and it's what like Bernard was talking about, the fact that he's making more organic things. So like the like that blender is kind of like getting a big old chunk of artist clay, right? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Bernard? Like doing that, like using kind of an artist clay and watching them make a sculpture out of it.
You can, yeah, definitely. There's also a great program called Mesh Mixer, which is another program that I use. So, and the other thing too is it's never just one program too. So, I mean, for a lot of the things I design, there's a workflow, where you might have 3 or 4 different programs. I mean, it's not uncommon to create something in A, bring it into B, do something in B, bring it into C. So there are different programs that will do different things as well.
Bob, what's the name of that program we use for scaling?
NetFab.
No, NetFab. Yeah. That's talk about a learning curve. There's that one's not exactly. That's not for the faint of heart either, but it does a great job of scaling.
Yeah, that's sure. I believe that's an Adobe product.
Okay.
And it's not available free anymore. They'll let you use NetFab online free to repair 3D models, but the scaling feature is now gone.
So there's a little bit of a learning curve. So especially if you're not formally trained in the designing arts or to get into 3D printing, like I'm a computer programmer, data scientist. That's my job, right? I don't have much, and I can read a blueprint, but I couldn't make one, right? So there's going to be a significant learning curve for me to learn how to figure out the geometries and get things set up to where they need to be. And then it sounds like scaling is a very important part of this process as well. So not only are you able just to, make the design, but appropriately scale it so that the print comes out to the right size. So it sounds like there is a bit of a process involved just to get you to the end product, from the cocktail napkin that we've been seeing brought up on screen to the actual piece of resin that resembles the model. So there's also another part I want to throw in there. Sure. Because it's kind of like the architect that designs the beautiful glass house. It's absolutely stunning, award-winning. It's going to be in every architecture magazine, and it's beautiful. And then he gives the blueprints to the builder, and the builder says, "What do you want me to do with this? It's gorgeous, but you can't build it." Right. So half of the equation, yes, is what you're talking about, is the design, but equal, and what I spend probably as much, if not more time doing, is once you have this thing designed, there's a whole art and science to getting it to actually print out. As Mike showed us, there's temperature, there's orientation, there's a whole sort of I don't know what the word is, but there's a whole process to getting this beautiful thing that you designed on the computer to actually become a physical object. And
but there's no standard. There's no standard instruction manual for it, though.
It's all trial and error.
Every piece is different.
Yeah.
Every single thing is different. You could have 3 designs on your plate and 2 of them work and 1 doesn't. And for no reason, just you put that same design that failed on the plate by itself and it works beautifully. And that's happened. That's just.
Well, what I would kind of liken it to, especially everybody who's older than about 40 will probably understand a little bit about this. So if you have film photography, it's its own process as a hobby.
This kid in here.
I don't know.
I just graduated.
What's film photography?
What's that?
Yeah. I still chisel out of rock. Ding, 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 ding.
Well, the point is, so you got the camera and actually taking the picture. That part of it is its own thing. It's got its science where you have the timing and whatnot. But then you have the development, and the development process is its own whole art.
Yeah.
Right. You go into the dark room and actually turn the negative into a picture. And yeah, I did it in high school for half a semester. I still couldn't do it to save my soul today. I just spent time in the dark room goofing around. I think that was.
But I can kind of see the difference here is that you have people who are able to design stuff, and that's one skill set. But then the printing is its whole other skill set. And if you really want to master the art of 3D printing, you have to be able to understand both. That is, unless you want to be limited to the files that are just available on the internet, in which that's perfectly fine as well. And we'll have more files coming out as this becomes more popular too. So like a lot of the people that have their printers in the box, one thing I would recommend is take the printer out of the box, play with it, figure out how to use it. The worst thing that's going to happen is you have to trash some things that you fail to print off, and that's normal. All of us, I'm sure, have had failed prints, plenty of them. For me, my failure rate was probably about 90% for the first few times until I really got into the details of it. And then I finally, it started to get more successful. But I liken it kind of to, say, a roll of film. You got 36 images. When you first start on that first roll, you only get about 2 or 3 that are any good. But as you learn more and more and more, eventually you start getting 24, 26, 28 images that are coming out pretty good.
Right.
Now, it's funny you say that, because now I was just talking with somebody the other day about this, is how the heck did we ever go rail fanning? This is a little tangent. How the heck did we ever go rail fanning before digital cameras? I tell you what, and Bob, I'll tell you what, you want to see a guy who knows how to take pictures. There's a guy right down there, Bob Frascella, has a collection of photographs that is second to none that almost nobody's ever seen. And one of these days, I'm going to get him to write a book about it. But it is phenomenal. Now, and Bob, you and I have talked about that.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with the 3D printing. Can you imagine if you had a digital camera back when you were doing all that stuff in St. Louis and all those, just imagine the difference and what you would have been able to capture doing that with newer technology. The 3D printing stuff is the same way. I think 3D printing is still in its infancy, very much so.
Really?
Oh my goodness, yes. We haven't even started to scratch the surface of what this technology is going to be able to do for society and for the hobby and everything. This is just, we are very much in the infancy here. Great stuff is being done because you have a lot of very mechanical minded people starting to do what they're what they are doing with it. But myself personally, I just think that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't seen the we only see the 10 feet above the water right now. We haven't seen the 300 feet that's below the water surface. And there is just limitless technological advances on the horizon in this part of the hobby and just for society in general, medical use and all sorts of different things.
I know we use it in. I work for a Oshkosh corporation where we make vehicles, right? Heavy duty vehicles, and we use it to. If we have any tooling that we need to spin up or castings, we use 3D printing on a larger scale, right?
Yeah.
To help us get the tools or the spare parts that we need. So yeah.
I think
we lost James.
We lost James. We'll get him back in.
South Dakota shut off the power.
Well, he made that comment about film photography, and that was it.
That was it. Yep.
That was it. He crossed the line.
Oh, there he is.
I'm
back.
So okay.
What you have to do? Go and plug the internet meter or what?
Yeah, and I think a cloud came over. That's what it was.
Yeah, there you go. So let's unpack that a little bit then. So that it was one of the things that I had jotted down as a question that I wanted to ask was, okay, so what has the impact, or let's start today. What is the impact that 3D printing has done for, let's just focus on model railroading. And then after we marinate on that question for a little bit, let's talk about what the future of 3D printing is going to hold, and see where that part of the discussion takes us. So, okay, let's open it up. Again, people in the chat, I know you've been a very good group tonight, asking some good questions and some good and some good topics in there. So I guess Mike is waxing philosophical and he is right.
Obviously, Ned must have gotten his check.
Yeah, Ned must.
Ned is a very good friend of Bob and mine's, and he is an interesting cat.
But-
and I tell you what, he is a super cool dude.
Yeah.
I am. That's the first time I've ever had anybody tell me I'm right. Thank you, Ned.
So let's unpack this, right? So what has 3D printing done for the society of model railroaders to date? So we've talked about a couple things, but maybe Bernard, if you want to maybe jump in here. I mean, I'll
go back to, I'll answer that question, but first, just to play off what Mike was saying. I completely agree with what Mike said. And to tie it back to my earlier comments, being a recovering graphic designer, I remember very well getting my first Mac computer back in, 85, 86.
Mm-hmm.
And, like Mike, I was the first kid on the block, with my Mac computer. And that led to, a career in marketing, advertising, graphic design. And fast forward, call it, 30, 35 years later, and we've gone from, me being the only kid on the block with an Apple Macintosh computer to, web-based systems like Canva, where, anyone can make a wedding invitation by literally sort of dragging, see elements together. And I wax philosophical a few times on this as well, because I think back to sort of the desktop publishing revolution, and that Apple computer allowed me to do things that only, $100,000, multi-$100,000 typesetting machines could do.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, this little box for $3,000 replaced hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of professional equipment and put the hands of publishing, the ability to publish in my hands. And I think, we went through that with music, GarageBand, all the music software. We went through that with video, with the iMovies and the other things like that. And I think what we're really seeing right now is the rise of desktop manufacturing. So once again, the things that I'm producing are only things that, 10 years ago, you could have done with hundreds of thousands of dollars, or 20 years ago, hundreds of thousands of dollars of professional equipment. And that stuff still exists. The Shapeways are still using the $1 million machines. But just as, 30, 35 years ago, there was the desktop publishing revolution, which gave me the ability to self-publish. Now I've become a model railroad manufacturer. And if you look at the sort of evolution curve over the last 30, 35 years for all of these other things, I think that's exactly where it's going to go for desktop manufacturing. So I would use that definitely as sort of an analogy. And, I sort of talk to my kids and say, like, this is, we're not at the Star Trek replicator yet, but damn, we're getting close. It's getting really interesting. So
what about you, Bob? You come from the engineering background as well. Do you share the same sentiment as Mike and Bernard on the fact that this is not just a fad, this is really enabling people to get going, or is it flash in the pan type business we're talking here?
Well, first I have to say that I'm still lamenting that they took my Kodachrome away, but
they wrote a song about that, didn't they?
That aside, from my perspective, I believe that 3D printing is a tool, and it's a very good tool for modelers, and it's enabled me to create models that I would have never been able to do.
It's the new X-Acto knife.
Scratch building or kit bashing or any other contemporary means of model building. So it's really open doors, particularly for those of us that model either an obscure era or are in an obscure scale like S scale where very little is available. So I do think, I definitely don't think it's a fad. I just think it's going to grow, and maybe someday rapid prototyping will become rapid manufacturing, as Bernard was saying. But what I see maybe as the immediate future is to take some of these 3D designs and go to a a kit manufacturer, for example. There's a lot of resin casting manufacturers that can use your 3D design as a basis for producing a new kit. And as Mike knows, I've been in discussion with several kit manufacturers, offering to work with them on my designs to hopefully help produce a kit that's otherwise not available in S scale. So, from my perspective, I don't see myself as being a manufacturer. I have no interest in doing that. And, I applaud Bernard for doing that. But, from my perspective, it's a means to an end. And hopefully my designs will be able to be used by others and to help grow the scale and create interest from other manufacturers. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's interesting, James. I don't mean to just do the round robin here, but on Mike's, Bernard's, and Bob's point here, I'm just going to end up saying ditto at the end of all of that and agree with everything that everyone said. But did any different take, or are you going to echo similar thoughts here?
Well, in a way, I'll echo similar thoughts, but for, say, model railroaders specifically, I'm a young guy. I'm 27. This, to me, seems like the second big revolution in model railroading when first, at the very beginning of my life, like age 4 or 5, that's when the DCC really took off.
Yep.
And that was more of a slow burn, as I'm sure many would agree. There's people started adopting it over time. 3D printing, though, this is different. We're talking about 5-6 years ago. These printers that we have at home weren't around. And now you look at all the people in the chat that own a printer.
Yeah, right.
That's an amazing turnaround. And these people are all model railroaders, or at least most of them. I don't know who's watching this who isn't a model railroader, but there might be one or two. Who knows?
and we welcome them. And that's okay.
Of course. But it's the point is, in a matter of a couple of years, we've seen this popularity absolutely skyrocket. Yeah. And I think the big reason for that is that within the hobby, you've got various models that are common that the larger manufacturers can make. You're talking like the mainline diesel engines and HO and N scale, that sort of stuff. But then you have things like, this was the norm, 12 years ago. That's a Bachmann Mogul. I don't know if the camera can focus on it.
I'm picking it
However,
up.
When it comes to, say, steam engines, am I breaking up?
No, you're good.
Am I back in?
Yep, you're
all
back
right,
in.
Sweet. So you have steam engines like this, and Bachmann makes, it's been pretty much making the same model now for 25 years, give or take?
Yeah.
However, in real life, steam engines had all sorts of smaller classifications that were specific to the railroad. They were built to specifications. So one thing that I'm hoping for with this 3D printing is that I'll be able to take the specific models that you can't really produce on a large scale, but are important to my particular prototypes, and be able to design them and print them. And then I have a working model that isn't really available, that can't be made by the major manufacturers.
Sure. Mike has his hand raised. Yes, Mike, go ahead.
I think James just hit something right on the head.
Yep.
I think, personally, you're going to start in, I don't know if it'll be Athearn, if it'll be Scale Train, who it's going to be, if it's going to be Bachmann, whoever it's going to be. Somebody out there will go, here is a, Bob, just for our sake, here's a GP38-2. Here are the files you have. You pay X number of dollars for those files. That file, because they have the encryption technology, be able to make that a single print type, so that you can go in there when you put it in there, and it's kind of like the old, get smart thing. This message will self-destruct. You use it one time and boom, off you go. So you'll buy that file, but in order to buy that file, it'll tell you need to use this type of resin. You would need to have a build plate of this size. Here are the instructions for what to set your printer at. They will give you all of that. And because if they do that, now think about the technology in boxing and painting and all of those things that the manufacturer would not have to do. So it's a huge cost savings to them, because now the consumer is doing all of their manufacturing work for them in their house.
Yeah.
And I think the technology is getting to the point, like what Bernard was saying. We're not at the Star Trek replicator yet, but we're pretty close. And I think that's kind of what we're going to start seeing, where you're going to see a manufacturer come out that is not, they're going to make an announcement for a locomotive, but it'll be 100% 3D print file purchase locomotive that you print at home. Yep. I think that we are getting close to having something like that happen.
So, yeah, Mike, I agree. And to touch on what James was saying as well, and moving it into a more contemporary era, it was once said that EMD stood for every model different. Yep. And that's the case with diesel locomotives, because so many items were railroad specific. And
right.
If for example, Mike, in your example, where you can take those files and create a locomotive on your printer, you can make it specific to the locomotive you want to model, whether you're adding extended range dynamic braking, for example, or notched corners of the pilot, or whatever the railroad specific item was. EMD or SP style class lights, or the multiple lights that Southern Pacific put on their locomotives, and L-shaped windshields. All those things could then be incorporated into that design file that you're purchasing, and developed, as a one-time use on a personal printer. Maybe that's the future.
Well, and there is one holdup, at least with the locomotives, from what I've seen. You can create the superstructure and all the various plastic parts you want for the engine. However, the main thing we still need, though, is we still need the motors and the gears and the wheels and the couplers. What I think would be really nice is if a manufacturer would decide to simply make the chassis of different lengths and sizes, and then they could have the files to download. So you just select the proper chassis, download the files, print, you do the painting, the lettering, the weathering, and there you go. You got a complete model. One thing, say Northwest Shortline, # not sponsored.
# not sponsored.
That's right. But anyways, they got those little power trucks, those Stanton drives, and I haven't been able to test those out yet. But one thing I've noticed is, as I was designing a 3D printable 44-tonner, they don't have the proper wheelbase necessary for the 44-tonner, at least in the scales I was hoping to get, which would be S scale and O scale. They have it's 8 foot. Well, 44-tonner is 6.5 foot. So the challenge I'm trying to figure out is, how do I design a 3D printable bogie that can be connected up? So you just have to have the proper gears and the wheels. However, that's really what's hanging me up on that project. And it would be really nice if manufacturers would go in there and they'd say, okay, here's all the different locomotives, EMD and Alco and whatever made. Let's just let's build chassis to specific sizes and sell them. You can sell them at a reduced cost, because you don't have all the injection molding and the painting and the lettering needed for the mass-produced models. You just have the chassis and stick with that.
One other thing too about 3D printing is the fact that with the advent of this technology, you're starting to see modeling come back into the hobby of model railroading. You're not just taking everything right out of a box anymore. Guys are starting to look at resin kits again, resin structures. They're looking at, like what Bernard does, with all his awesome little details. Holy cow. There's like so many things I want to buy from you, but there's like, so many different avenues that this is opening up, that people don't just have to spend X number of dollars and take something out of a box. They can actually have the pride of being able to say, I printed this and I painted this and I did this, and, you know, do that. I think it's a whole, like you say, a hobby within a hobby, you know?
Yeah, right.
I think it also makes more interesting layouts because, you know, there was a time where I'd go look at layouts and everyone would have, you know, the same bakery kit, or, you know, sure, they'd modify it and, you know, they'd weather it differently, but you knew what you were looking at. You know, you could see the cement works, you could see the bakery, you know, you could
Gruesome
see
casket.
Gruesome casket. Hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored.
You know, there was a uniformity, and part of that was just what was available. But, you know, this unlocks people's imaginations, and I'm seeing, you know, more interesting scenes. And it's not just the scenic details, which is the stuff I'm into, but, you know, on the locomotive side, you know, there could be one obscure switcher that worked in one cement factory in you know, make up your date in one location, and you can have that and model that on your layout now because someone has designed it, or you can design it yourself. So we're getting more interesting scenes, we're getting more different scenes, we're getting, you know, I think many more interesting things to look at on layouts, because they're just, as you know, as was said, this is a tool that allows people to unlock their creativity.
So what's the most creative request you've ever gotten, Bernard? what is the one thing that, like, I mean, honestly, and not to put you on the spot, well, kind of, yeah. But I mean, kind of, yeah. But what is the most unusual thing that you kind of got requested that you're kind of like, oh man, there's some things I don't know if I should do this or not.
Few things I've refused to produce, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There was one person that wanted naked garden gnomes carrying strange objects, like weapons, yeah. There's been some weird stuff. I've had people want to do, a lot of times people will want to do scenes from movies.
Sure.
Does that get proprietary? Do you have to get permissions for doing that?
Scenes from movies that, besides the whole copyright thing, it's like, yeah, I know it's a movie scene, but I don't think I'm going to be bringing out the serial collection by Miniprints anytime soon. So, they're but it's amazing though, because I think that's a really interesting question, because you wouldn't believe, like, people model or want to model incredibly different things. Like, people model things that have meaning to them. It could be, their favorite scene from a movie, or it could be, a memory from their childhood, or it could be, there's no limit to #no limit to what people want to model. Yeah. And I mean, that's what the 3D printer does, is it unlocks that #no limit.
Split rock. Yeah, I gotta say it for the audio playback. Split rock comes in and he says, "Sure, I asked for naked gnomes one time,
just one time,
and now I get outed on YouTube and in the podcast universe as well. So in the audio version, you'll get dinged there as well. Thanks, Split Rock, for giving us all a laugh.
There are strange requests, and a lot of the strange requests are fun strange requests and get made. But a lot of them are just not going to get made.
Sure.
But I appreciate the creativity.
That's awesome. So I did want to just touch on. And again, if you guys want to circle back to some of the other points we're trying to make, but what does the future hold? So what is that going to look like for 3D printing here coming up in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What do you think is going to be out there? Because I have no idea. I mean, I can dream, but I have no frame of reference when it comes to this topic. So what do you guys think?
I saw $1 million 3D printer the other day that'll print in full color.
What?
Yeah, resin in full color.
What?
Yeah.
Wait a
it's
minute.
insane.
Wait, so it'll actually decipher separate colors. So like if you had a Union Pacific boxcar you wanted to print, you could print it in the yellow, and as it's printing, it would print the Union Pacific lettering and everything on the side.
It was printing little sort of dinosaur toys, and they came out like, this is something that, you know, I would have printed out in gray resin. I would have primed it. I would have got my paints out and I would have painted it, and it came out in perfect printed color.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I didn't go too deep into how it did it because there were a lot of other shiny objects that distracted me, and I couldn't really afford $1 million machine. So I'm like, cool, okay, next. But yeah, no, color 100%. I mean, think back to the photography. Black and white film became
comes back to photography.
Color film, right?
Yeah.
So,
Bob's Kodachrome.
Yeah. Bob's Kodachrome, exactly. So yeah, 100%. I definitely see color 3D printing. And you can kind of get it in the filament world right now. You know, they have those multi-filaments that will do, you know, you can get like load 4 different color filaments in and it'll stop and do different portions. But yeah, I think we'll see color 3D resin.
That sounds, that's a game changer. I mean, there was a comment, I think something about being able to, you know, not have to paint your 3D prints, and there it is. It's on the way.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you think they'll be able to, and maybe this is just me being naive, but you know, like for things that are animated, you know, that have like a ball and socket type joint or something of that nature, do you think they'll be able to add those types of I guess characteristics to a 3D print?
Like maybe like a working U joint?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like maybe the structure on the, or like the piston structure on the side of a
Shay,
like on the side of a Shay, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're there yet. Pretty close.
I've seen 3D printed objects. I mean, there are tons of them online that will print, and there are things inside of things that rotate.
Yep.
So, you know, there are interesting things you can print. I've seen like little articulated, sort of look like salamanders and things that, you know, actually move. What I can't quite figure out, and I've never tried it, but what I can't figure out is you can print it, but how do you support it? Like, I don't know how you would support, you know, two things that sort of fit together. I mean, I think it would all come down to, it's all doable. The question is, how do you support it? And then more importantly, it's not even the supports, it's the post-processing, because that's a whole other thing that we haven't even talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bane of my existence. I mean, my least favorite thing in the entire world is snipping all of the supports necessary to get your thing to print out.
Right.
So, you know, everything's doable. I'm pretty convinced that pretty much everything's doable if you invest enough time and energy and experiment. Someone's figured it out. So
have you guys heard of the Moore's law? Basically talking about computer processors and microchips as the cost or the speed goes up and the cost comes down by 50% each time. Do you think that there's a Moore's law that's going to come into play here with 3D printers? Is the cost going to eventually come down as the technology increases, or are you going to see just this exponential curve of, well, now we got $1 million printers that can print, you know, full color and 3D circuitry and all that type of stuff? What is the market going to look like for a printer in the near future?
I think the 3D printers are getting to be in the same world and realm as cell phones, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, I think so. I think that'd be the best analogy for it. Like the one that I like I have an Anycubic Photon. I know my printer is so outdated and slow by comparison, and I bought mine 2.5-3 years ago, something like that. The ones that they have out today are 5 times faster than this, like Bernard was saying earlier, you know, but yet this one is what works for me. I mean, I have no problems the speed or anything. It works. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's like your cell phone. You could go 5 years without getting a brand new cell phone. You're going to be 4 generations behind, but you're going to be able to still make calls and text and
sure
do the things. It's just how fast are you going to be able to do it? I mean, that's the only analogy that I can come up with, to be honest with you.
And I think the model's a little bit too laser printers. I mean, they pretty much give the laser printers away. I mean, you can get a pretty decent laser printer for, $100, $200. But you're locked in and you're spending, a fortune on toner cartridges. And that's where they make their money. I mean, they might as well just hand the laser printer out to you and say, okay, you're now going to spend $10,000 over the course of that printer on our toner. And I mean, that's the thing too with these resin printers is you're dropping $300-400, but then it's each bottle of resin, and you go through quite a few bottles of the stuff. I mean, that's where the real cost is in this.
Sure.
I mean, it's not the electricity, it's the time and it's the material cost. And unfortunately, one of the things we didn't talk about, but one of the things that resin has as a disadvantage is it's quite a bit more expensive than filament. So filament is great, if you're printing a throttle pocket, and it's relatively good for big, bulky, and it's relatively cheap. But I'm paying like $50 Canadian, which is probably like $35-40 US, for a bottle of resin. And that's, you can get up to probably $80 a bottle for some resins. So there's that ongoing cost associated with the printing. And I suspect that's probably where they make quite a bit of their money is on the consumables.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Bernard or James. Also, the resin, like the resin that I've got right now is just a basic gray resin. I can't remember the name of it. It's sitting over here, but it says right on there, do not reuse. So once you go through and make a print, that whatever didn't get used for that print is basically waste resin. And so are some resins reusable, some not reusable?
It depends. I mean, if you left it in there for 6 months, you might have a problem. But I mean, if it's in overnight, or I've left resin in the tray for a weekend and come back and it's fine.
Okay.
So I think I don't think you have to throw it out.
Okay.
Well, and I've been recycling the resin too. So even though I just started, I'm still not completely through with my first bottle yet, but I've been recycling. I just take the extra, put it back in its bottle. I think in the future, what I'll do is I will take the resin that's already used and put it in an empty bottle. That's way
what I started doing.
That way I don't mix up the old and the new stuff.
Yeah.
Because that way, if the used stuff goes bad, I don't want it to get mixed in with the new stuff.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked that, is because of the fact that that's what I started doing. Is I started taking the used resin, putting it in a separate bottle, and then when I go to make new prints, I just use that used resin. And if the print doesn't work, then I do reuse the print with new resin. And then if it still doesn't work, well, then it's me. Yeah. But I mean, it's then I got more used resin. That's all. But
another ornament for the fridge, for the refrigerator.
Yeah. I'm actually going to slap a magnet on this thing tonight, I think, and put it in the fridge.
I'd put that in a display case. It all
all
started right here, baby. This is where it started.
This is where it goes.
So I want to, we're getting on to an hour and a half here. And I wanted to make sure that the folks in the chat, we're carrying about 40 people throughout the whole chat. If you guys have any questions for James or Bernard or Bob or Mike, don't ask me about this, because I don't know. Why don't you go ahead and get them in the chat so we can get them up there. But I just wanted to give our crack panel here. Is there any topics regarding that we kind of missed that we should really cover tonight before we start bringing her in to tie up for the evening?
Yes.
Yes.
Wear gloves, wear safety goggles.
Okay.
and make sure it's well ventilated, or you use a respirator, because you don't want to. I mean, the one thing we haven't talked about is it's completely safe if you wear gloves and eye protection, but this is not stuff that you want to slap around on the kitchen table. Resin is toxic. It's nasty stuff. And for some reason, it gets everywhere. I don't care how clean, you will get this on everything, everywhere. And it's not the type of stuff that you want to really inhale or get in your eye or get on your skin. So I think safety protection is really, really important.
Sure.
And it's fine. I mean, it's just wear nitrile gloves and you're fine. I mean, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's not a reason not to do it, but, give it a little bit of respect and approach it with, you are playing with chemicals. So you don't necessarily want to go bathing in the stuff. You want to treat it with a bit of respect and use the appropriate safety gear.
Yeah. And then just just a good respirator that you can pick up at your hardware store, like in the paint section.
Yep.
That type of thing, like a 3M.
Yeah. Or vent it. I mean, for a long time, I had my 3D printer beside my spray booth, and I just ran the spray booth, I mean, you don't have to be, I see guys building, fancy enclosures. And I mean, I don't think you have to get too precious with it, but I do think you need to have a window open or some ventilation,
Sure.
You don't want to be, breathing that in for hours.
Yeah. I put a directional fan connected right to the back of mine.
There you go.
That goes right up, and it goes into a Y pipe that connects to my spray booth, and right out a dryer vent thing that I put in my basement window. And I still running both of those. I still get fumes in the basement.
Yeah,
so
my wife and kids
not
were
a lot,
really,
but my wife notices it. That's for sure.
My wife and kids were really, really happy. I was up to about 10 machines, and my wife and kids were really, really happy when I moved them out of the basement into a commercial space.
Wow.
And I don't think I or the machines are allowed to go back into the basement.
No, one thing that we haven't talked about that I just happened to think of, and Bob,
Okay.
I want to start out with you. We haven't touched on painting a 3D print. So, Bob, what is like just brief, kind of the Cliff Notes version of it? How do you go through in the process of once you get your 3D print from Shapeways or whoever you get it from? What's the process you go through in order to make sure that you can paint it?
Well, what I do is I typically print using Shapeways fine detail plastic, and quite often it comes with a residue on it, whether it's wax or I don't know what it is, but I usually remove that with isopropyl alcohol, and I try not to have the alcohol stay in contact with the resin plastic for more than about 5 minutes, then rinse it real good. And once you do that, you can visually tell if all the wax is off the print, then it's ready for painting. And then what I typically do is prime it. And then if there's layering lines that are visible once it's primed, then I'll sand those down, lightly sand them. Sometimes it's a real pain in the butt to do if there's fine detail on the print, like, for example, door latches.
Right.
It can be a challenge to sand around those. And sometimes you just have to say, well, how visible is the layering, and how much effort do I want to put into sanding those lines smooth. In most cases, when you get it painted and primed and painted and decaled, and then weathered, you're not going to see the layering lines.
Bob, I know you sent me a couple of pictures of some models. Do you mind if I share one of those right now for the team? I'm going to share the old Lehigh Valley one.
Oh boy, here goes more production stuff.
Yeah, it's
this is gonna be good.
This
is fantastic.
Yeah.
Wait, Bernard, James, wait till you see this. This is going to be great.
So
look at that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's the that's the GP38-2, and the Delaware and Hudson inherited a bunch of these as a concession of the Conrail merger. And basically, they put these things right into service. They they patch painted over the Lehigh Valley in a very, I don't know what they used, probably house paint or something, because it washed off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So this would be a circa 1977 locomotive. It's probably been on the D&H about, I don't know, a year. And they changed the number. That the Lehigh Valley number was 324, and they put a 7 in front of it.
Just put 7 on it.
The number is offset under the cab, and they just stenciled on D&H on the side. But this is I would say 80% of this is 3D printed. The pilot stepwell is all one 3D piece. There's a 3D printed pilot plow. The short hood, the cab, the long hood is all 3D printed, and the fuel tank is partially 3D printed. It was the ends and middle sections that form the curve of the fuel tank are 3D prints, but the outside the fuel tank is a 3D wrapper or a styrene wrapper. And the reason it's done that way is because, like I said, EMD, every model different.
Sure.
Fuel tank lengths varied by owner in terms of capacity. So, it could be as big as a 3,000 gallon tank, and it would fit almost between the trucks, but smaller tanks. I think Mike, you probably know this better than I do, but the Milwaukee Road had 1,700 gallon tanks.
Yeah, I think it's 1750 tanks or something like that. I have mine right here. I just take mine right down here quick. Yeah, mine's kind of right there.
Just give me a second, Mike. I'll pull you back up.
Sorry.
So you're top dog here.
So that's and all it is the ends are, as you can see, are clear.
Yep.
So those are 3D printed, and then they have the right profile. But then we use evergreen styrene strip, and then the outside is a wrapper of 20 thousandths V groove.
Got to have the V groove, right? So it goes around the corner.
Well, not only that, but if you get close enough to a prototypical locomotive, the fuel tanks actually have those little
bends in them.
So it makes it a very prototypical looking tank.
Yeah.
And it works out really, really well. And that was kind of one of the things Bob and I kind of brainstormed on that. I'm like, we were actually thinking about how do we do this make all these tanks. And I think Bob, I think Bob was the one that said, well, why don't we just make the ends? I'm like, that's brilliant. And then we made baffles for the longer ones because
we did.
We have baffles that on the inside that have the profile, so that way you don't lose structural integrity with the longer tanks.
Right.
So
Andy, back to the model itself. So because Shapeways is relatively expensive, I think, and especially to build a whole locomotive in fine detail plastic, my intent was to build common elements, flat surfaces out of styrene. And so the deck, the walkway, and the frame is built out of styrene.
Yeah.
So, just built out of styrene shapes. The fuel tank is an evergreen tube with 3D printed ends. So you can make the air tank as long as you want and just use the 3D printed ends to make the connection for the piping. We 3D printed the fuel fill, the fuel gauges, and the sight gauge on the side of the fuel tank. And there is no EMD Type M Blomberg truck available in S scale. And
oh, really?
The Lehigh Valley 7324 had the M type trucks. So we created 3D printed parts that took a standard Blomberg and added the dampening strut on the rear axle, the snubber instead of the leaf springs, and basically you could take a standard Blomberg and remove the outside brake calipers and add those 3D elements to it to get yourself at an M-type truck. So, basically I would say this thing is probably about 80% 3D printed and commercial parts for obviously the handrail stanchions and the couplers and the American Models S-scale drive system that is the basic 4-axle drive system.
Wow. It's a remarkable model. So on the topic of painting, Bernard, with your products that you produce, is there any special I guess care that goes into the pre-paint step, or is it just paint right out of the box?
Ours are ready to roam.
Ready to roam.
Ready to roam. Hashtag ready to roam. I like stuff to go out as perfect as I can get it.
Yeah.
So a lot of time and effort, probably too much, and I'm going to have to address it, is spent removing the sprues. And they're all washed, in the isopropyl. So when you get it, you've had a few, I think, in front of you. They should feel quite dry. They shouldn't feel sticky. Yeah, they're ready to paint. And I actually have a painting tutorial up on the Miniprints website.
Okay.
Down at the bottom of the website, you'll see something that says painting clinic. And I mean, to sort of boil it down to 3 steps really easily. I'm a big fan of rattle can primer.
Yep.
I hate getting the airbrush out because I spend about 30 seconds airbrushing and about 10 minutes cleaning. So I think, just a good super flat Krylon and Rust-Oleum make a really good, they call it a camouflage. And the nice thing about the camouflage, I usually use a khaki camouflage. It's dead flat. And I just give it a really, really, really light mist. And I think it helps if you put the spray can in some warm water for about 5 minutes.
Yep.
You can get a really fine mist that's almost airbrush quality out of a rattle can. And then I just go at it with acrylics. And I think that the key with painting with acrylics, and I saw a question earlier about brushes.
Yes.
The key with acrylics is really, really fine washes of I almost call it painting with water. So I use something called a wet palette, and a wet palette will absolutely change the way you paint. And if you use a wet palette and you water down your acrylics to very, very thin and apply it, let it dry, apply it, let it dry, you get really good control and you get really nice coverage. And that's it. It's basically the wet palette, it's the spray can rattle primer, and then it's painting with, very, very, very thinned out acrylics as opposed to just globbing it on, which, we all want to do because it's fast, but it's not necessarily good.
Yeah.
You cover up a lot of detail that way then.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get it done in a night, but but that's the key for me. And I find that they're, really, I enjoy that. Oh, the other thing that's absolutely critical, the most important thing, if you're older than James anyway, is I need an optimizer. I can't do anything without this.
Yes.
I can't, that's the other thing. I almost find that the brush is less important than this.
The
thing.
optimizer. Yep. I've broke down and got a pair of the sexy gogs as well.
There you go. Yeah. Mike said we can all wear ours at the same time.
Yeah. There you go.
But the optimizer is critical. And then it's just, the other thing I do, I don't know whether I have one in front of me, but I've cut a bunch of, here's one right here. Oh, hang on. I cut a bunch of wooden dowels. I've just got some parrots sitting on this one, but I always paint on a wooden dowel. So if you're holding a dowel, and then I don't know where, I probably have a paintbrush around.
Look at those. Those are amazing.
But if you're holding a dowel, and then you've got a paintbrush, and this is obviously a pretty crappy paintbrush, but then you've got something to rest your hand against, and it's that bracing, right?
Yep.
So they're little, and this is all just thank you YouTube, right?
There you go.
It's just there's I've learned a lot actually from the wargamers. They are miles ahead.
Oh
of us.
man,
Yes.
Miles ahead of us in painting.
those guys in the World War II people,
Yeah,
the military
those
modelers.
the army armor modelers, and then those tabletop gamers, those Warhammer painters.
Warhammer,
gosh.
exactly. Google Warhammer on YouTube, and the painting clinics that come up. I've learned so much.
Yep.
By watching those guys.
That's where I got my wet palette from.
Yep.
It's an army painter war games wet palette. So.
Yep, totally. Yep. Squid Master, whatever. There's one guy out there. Squidmar, yeah. He's
Squidmar.
like one of my favorites. I learned about so many tips from him. But it's just, it's the optimizer, it's practice, a few tricks you pick up online.
Yeah. There you go. So we've pretty much covered the whole gambit this evening from I guess inception of our 3D print or our model all the way to
The fact that we're all old as dirt except James.
well, yeah. let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that. But we've covered that topic. We've covered building the design, printing, and then what do we do afterwards? With the cleanup and the actual painting of the model itself. So I guess before we haven't got a lot of questions from the chat, but I do want to give our panel just one last round before we kind of close up shop for this evening. Any other topics that we want to get out there? Any questions or things that we've left unturned that we want to just get some light on for the folks out there listening or watching on the replay?
Split Rock there says has a question out there. It says, "What's a good cleaning product to prep for primer?" And I think we touched on it. Isopropyl alcohol. Is there specific 70%, 90%? I've usually used 90% is what I've always used. I don't know if that's too harsh, but
yeah, same here. Yeah, just don't leave it on for a long time.
Yeah, just don't leave it. Yeah,
don't let it linger, right?
Yeah, don't let it sit in there because it'll get real brittle and it'll just make your resin really nasty.
Okay. So that great. So what I'll do is I'll pass the microphone around the room here, just for any closing thoughts or comments about 3D printing. So James, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on all the topics that we covered this evening?
Well, first, want to make sure I'm not cutting out again, so everybody can hear.
Oh,
right?
you're good.
You're good. And you're gone.
And he's gone.
maybe.
All right. Thanks. Thanks,
Yep.
James.
Good work, James. That was the
Nice
best
job,
comment
James.
yet.
That was-
here he comes back.
Oh, holy cow.
He's back.
Seriously.
That was
Don't-
good.
Don't you ever hang up on us like that again.
The production quality here on the Second Section podcast is top notch.
Well, it's the best internet broke guy can buy. So
There you go. Yeah. So any thoughts there, James, before we close up shop?
Well, first, just in case I do cut out again, thank you both, Andy and Mike, as well as our guests there, Bob and Bernard. So thank you for having me.
Sure.
As far as thoughts
no
on
problem.
3D, as far as thoughts on 3D printing goes, I think we're going to continue to see it explode in popularity, at least for the next few years. I don't think it's a fad. I think it's going to be one more tool in the modeler's toolbox, and certain people will take advantage of it and be able to use it to their advantage. And others will keep going along there with the existing tools, and modelers tend to figure out what's best for them on a personal level. So this is just one option out there of many that can improve your modeling, and I hope a lot of people take a look at it. Other closing remarks I didn't bring this up, but I do have a new website called Homestake Models. I'm not intending to make this a full-fledged business. However, I do plan to have 2 different pages. One is going to be downloadable files that are specific for modelers. So things, simple things like a power pole, a street lamp, fences, garbage cans, you know, the kind of stuff that you see every day on the street. I want to make those files available free so they can be downloaded. And yeah, I've been working really hard on that website last 3 weeks. That's as far as I've gotten so far, but it'll continue to be updated here. And then the second thing that I plan to do with Homestake Models is I want to take a lot of the Black Hills prototypes that are still in existence, things like compressed air locomotives and the 1880 train equipment and stuff we have in the museum. I want to be able to take that stuff, make models not just for myself, but make them for sale.
Yeah.
And I'm still getting to it. I'm still experimenting, so I have no idea how far it'll take me on that. But I do plan to keep that website going for quite some time here, as far as building it up. I'm going to try to make that kind of my digital home base, so to speak of.
There you go. Very good. And again, hashtag not sponsored. So good luck to you, James, with that. And again, for anyone wishing to follow James on Homestake Models, I do have his website in the description of the YouTube broadcast this evening, as well as the show notes on the audio replay.
And the last thing here is I was finally successful in printing off this. I don't know if you'll be able to get it focused or not.
Let me see if I can switch you to the big screen here. There you go.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if anybody's able to focus. Let me touch it on the camera here.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
There, that's perfect.
So this is a model of Caboose 1208. People that have been on the Facebook page have probably seen some updates with that. But I finally got the body printed off. And next is going to be printing off the interior. This one's my reject, but I've completely measured the entire caboose just as a personal project here to see what I can do with it. So I got the body, the interior. I got the roof, which is still printed. Here's one of the rejects.
There you go. Put that on your wall of fame.
Oh yeah, it's all going on the wall frame there. But anyways, it's still the experimental phase, but I'm happy to finally have the files done because that was a lot of measuring. Every little measurement on that caboose I tried to replicate. And it's mostly an experimental process to see what's going to work and what won't on the printer. But I'm hoping it'll be a success.
Yeah. Well, it looks good from here. So well done, James. Bob, any closing remarks before we shut her down tonight?
Well, first off, I have to get some of those bathtub Madonnas.
Yes.
No layout is complete without at least a couple of those. But
yeah, that's for sure.
And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun, and I really enjoyed some of the insight from James and Bernard. Until tonight, I'd been very opposed to wanting to do 3D printing on my own, and I think maybe there might be a little change of heart there, and it may be something given the price of some of the printers coming down. It's something I may want to try on my own. So thanks for the suggestions and advice that you guys provide, and who knows where it may take us. I think, basically from my perspective, being a designer, I think I've got some good designs. And like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with Shapeways, but maybe we can find a good alternative for that as well.
For sure.
But I do have a Shapeways site for S-scalers who are looking for parts that you can't find anywhere else. You might want to go on to Shapeways and search my shop. It's called Century Models. It's mostly parts for EMD and Alco second generation diesels. And my most popular selling item is a draft gear coupler adapter for American Models locomotives. American Models produces S-scale locomotives, but they also make them adaptable to American flyer operators that use those huge claw couplers. So the adapter I created fits that gap and enables scale modelers to have a scale draft gear coupler box. So, but anyway, check it out, and if you can use some of the parts, they can be scaled to other scales as well. So, just having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. And then Bernard.
Well, it's been fantastic. Thank you. A lot of fun. Really great panel with amazing, conversation. So thank you for the invitation to join. I'm going to be in touch with both James and Bob. I think lots of things to talk about, and it's really fun to meet others in the hobby. And I find part of this too is that it's really fun to sort of bounce ideas around. And if anyone, I use my email as sort of my name, because if anyone has wants to reach out, if anyone has any questions, feel free to email me at bernard@miniprints.com. Happy to chat. Always looking for ideas for models. Unfortunately, there are far more ideas out there than I have time for. And I cannot promise that yours will be the idea that gets made this week, but I've got a big list of ideas out there, and I'm always looking for new bonus points to the more fun, weird, wild, different, ones that aren't done before. So I have more to talk about next time I'm on of the the weird things out there. The other thing I will do is I just want to say that I go on YouTube once a month. So I have a regular first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube on the Miniprints page. Yep. So just look up Miniprints on YouTube. I'm trying to get to 1,000. When I go to 1,000 subscribers, I will put everything on the site off 20% off for a day. So I am looking. If you're interested in the world of Miniprints and seeing what I'm up to, I do a lot of rail fanning. I've got a live rail cam out my window that people like to watch the trains go by. So check me out on YouTube, please, if that's your thing. And first Wednesday of every month, you will see what's new and weird and wild in the world of Miniprints.
And I will say it is a great live stream. I tuned in on this last one, and it just so happened to prompt me to pick up that auger. When I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, I got to have this. So go out there.
You do those in S scale, Bernard?
Yeah. Oh, well, every single mini print is produced in HO, S, and O scale.
There you
So
go.
everything on the mini print site will be produced in S scale. Produced in S scale. Oh yeah, no, that's the It's the scale with the identity crisis I was reading.
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah.
No, we've always produced an HO, S, and O, everything in the catalog, and most.
Oh no!
Oh
no!
His internet everything. Oh, and most everything. Okay,
everything.
Yeah, you cut out just a little bit there, Bernard.
Sorry, most everything in N.
Yeah, most everything in N. Okay, so there you go. So folks out there in the chat, I know you guys have been asking, can you print that in O? Can you print that in N? There you have it. So just make sure you contact Bernard at miniprints.com, and he can get you the bathtub Madonnas for your layout. That's going to happen. I have the scene in mind that's going to have the bathtub.
I've already got it. I've already got it half thought out already myself.
And thank you, Bernard and James and Bob for coming on the show, taking the time. I know it was run long, about 2 hours, but truly appreciate you guys giving us the time and walking through stuff with us. So I'm gonna let Mike give the last closing thoughts here before I shut her down for tonight. So Mike, what do you got?
Well, I just want to remind everybody that if you've got your printer in a box and you're sitting there and it's collecting dust, you spent money on that thing. Take it out and learn how to use it. You bought it for a reason, so you might. There's no excuse to have it. It's not going to magically work without inside the box, right? And so take it out, and if you make mistakes, if you have failures, perfect. That's the way this goes. You want to have failures because failures are how you learn. There isn't a single one of us on this panel that had the magic wand that had everything produced exactly perfect the first time we ever did anything. Here, case in point. This is a Pullman standard car body or underframe. Yeah, that's no. So, but the thing is don't give up on yourself with it either. Don't just I think it was Bernard that said something earlier. It said, a lot of people, they have a failure and then they want to throw it away, or maybe Andy was saying that, but they want to put it away and never touch it again because it didn't work for them the first time. Well, don't do that.
Yeah. Right.
You're by buying a 3D printer, you just became a maker.
There you go.
So enter into the world of making and learn how to make stuff, and you won't regret it. It's great fun, and it's very gratifying to have something you design come to life, so to speak, and be touchable and stuff.
Yeah, bringing it
into the real world. So that's what I got. Other than that, awesome show tonight, I thought.
Oh, this is very good, Bernard. Guys. Just print it. Well done.
Yeah, there you go. Hashtag just print it. That's a t-shirt right there.
That's a t-shirt right there. Speaking of t-shirts,
nobody said a single thing.
Nobody said anything.
Nobody has said anything.
Hey, what a segue, huh? What a segue.
Look at that.
The t-shirts. So yes, we're printing out, or we have the ability to make Second Section podcast t-shirts. So if anyone out there in the section crew wants one, just let us know, and we'll see if we can get enough demand put together to get these put out for everyone. So just let us know if you guys want a shirt. And Mike and I will entertain.
We haven't talked about price or anything.
Yeah,
we
haven't talked about price or nothing yet.
We just had these made for the two of us for right
shirts, now. So, but I think it's going to be a thing. So, again, so basically we'll pick up on the normal cadence again in 2 weeks. We'll be back on YouTube in the live stream. I'll get the audio feeds out there for last podcast as well. I think Burnout's out there right now. And just as a note to our guests here tonight, thank you again. This has been a fantastic show. Great commentary, questions. Thank you to the crew tonight. We carried about 30, 40, almost 50 people in the chat the whole night. So great show for everyone. And again, thank you. And we'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Night.